Hey everyone, and welcome to Exploring Health Macro to Micro. I'm your host, Parker Condit. In the show, I interview experts from all areas of health. This can be in areas you might expect, like exercise, nutrition, and mental health, while other topics may be in areas that you're less familiar with. Today is one I think a lot of people will enjoy. The exercise and fitness-related episodes tend to be quite popular, and that's exactly what we have in store. So today's episode is based all around exercise, fitness, and coaching. Here to discuss that with me is Mark Roberts. Mark has been coaching in the fitness industry for over 10 years. He's the co-owner and head coach at Rise Athletics in Winter Gardens, Florida. I've known Mark for a few years now, and since day one, I've had a deep amount of respect for him as not only just a business owner and a coach, but also as a person. This episode will be great for any trainers and coaches out there, but it'll also be good for people who are looking to join a gym. Because we spend a lot of time talking about what it takes as a gym owner and a coach to facilitate community and creating a great culture amongst staff and members in a gym. So if you're looking for a coach or for a gym, there's a lot in here that will give you an idea of what to look for in a good gym, a good coach, and a good training space. We also spend plenty of time talking about the other primary contributors to health outside of exercise and go into many specifics. This is a long episode, so it's getting split into two parts. This will be part one, and part two will be released in the same week, so there's not going to be a big gap to hearing the full conversation. So without further delay, please enjoy part one of my conversation with Mark Roberts. Mark Roberts, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we've known each other for a few years now. I first came across you by reaching out to you on Instagram. It was just in the early days of research for MotoBio, and you were kind enough to not only respond, but I happened to be in the Orlando area, and you invited me out to your gym while you were doing something that we're going to get to later called the Coaches Collective. But you took a big leap of faith and just kind of inviting me in and kind of setting me up as one of the speakers for that particular night. So I've always appreciated that. And it also just gave me a huge opportunity to kind of get to know you, get to know how you run your facility, the culture you drive there. And that's kind of how I want to start. So I want to give people a little bit of a backstory as to how we know each other. But you work with a lot of Olympic weightlifters, which is a highly technical skill. So you're a very technically sound coach, but you also in your gym, you have a lot of Gen Pop classes. So you kind of work across the spectrum of clients across the world of fitness. So I'm curious, like how you think working with such a technical group of athletes and then also working with Gen Pop, how those two serve each other. Like how does working with Gen Pop force you to be better with your very technical athletes? And then working with athletes, how does that serve sort of the other population you have as well?
Yeah, and it's a really good question because this also speaks to my background and kind of how I got into building Rise Athletics the way it is. And so for me, when I started out as a weightlifting coach, I found weightlifting after a playing rugby at college and strength and conditioning for myself. And I was very much kind of traditional strength and conditioning. And as I moved into weightlifting, weightlifting was a very traditional sport, very old school sport where it's the popularity of weightlifting has grown so much over the last decade. But before that, people either got into weightlifting when they were very, very little, 8, 10, 12, because they knew people who were already in the sport. Whereas nowadays, there's so many people coming into weightlifting from other athletic backgrounds, or even just, like you said, to Gen Pop. So people that maybe found CrossFit, and CrossFit puts such an emphasis on snatch and clean and jerk in their training that we found that you had 35-year-old mothers of three that all of a sudden fell in love with a barbell. And for us as weightlifting coaches, that was huge. It was amazing because it's really given us a new life as weightlifting coaches in a career direction that we really didn't have before. But when I was a strength and conditioning coach primarily, and weightlifting was more of my hobby, and I was teaching a few weightlifters and coaching, I found that everybody needs a foundation. And these new weightlifters that were coming in, these CrossFitters who just loved the barbell and wanted to improve their skills in the snatch and clean and jerk, they really didn't have that prerequisite foundation, the core strength, the shoulder stability, the mobility in their hips. And like you say, weightlifting has such a high technical demand. And one of those is on flexibility, being able to hit really, really great ranges of motion with an extreme amount of weight overhead meant that a lot of people were getting frustrated. They were finding that they couldn't hit these positions. They found they plateaued pretty early on. And it wasn't because they didn't have the desire to work on the skill of weightlifting, but it was more because they didn't have that foundational strength, because they hadn't been in a traditional strength and conditioning gym that had built a solid foundation. They'd found a love for the barbell through CrossFit. And it's never a rag on CrossFit at all, because I'm a CrossFit level 2 coach. I love CrossFit. I've coached CrossFit for many years. I own a CrossFit affiliate, but it's more just recognizing maybe some holes in the way that most people approach training and programming for CrossFit. So when the deeper I got into coaching weightlifters, the more I recognized this need for more of a broader foundation for a lot of my athletes. Now, I started as a traditional strength and conditioning coach, like I said. And so for me, I understood core strength. I understood all these prerequisites that had helped me and helped me kind of rebuild my own body after quite a few rugby injuries. And so when I recognized it with me and then that need with other people, I figured, well, why not create an atmosphere, a gym that prioritizes all of those different stages rather than just having a weightlifting gym? I found that it was going to be very beneficial to be able to show people that if you want to be an amazing weightlifter, you still need to have that foundational strength and that foundational control, core strength, mobility, flexibility. So it was very natural for me to be able to coach everybody from Gen Pop all the way through to weightlifting, because it's just really, it's in my mind, it's layers. Weightlifting is just the top layer, but even the best weightlifters require all of those other layers. And it's what we in traditional strength and conditioning kind of already know, but hadn't been applied yet to weightlifting or maybe to CrossFit as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to want to go into the distinction for anyone who's listening, and we use the term weightlifting. That's going to refer to Olympic weightlifting, not just lifting weights, which can be confusing. So maybe we'll go into a quick distinction about Olympic weightlifting versus powerlifting. But first, you mentioned something, how kind of the two ends of that spectrum. There's this principle in like product design where the example that I learned was, not that I'm a product designer, but I watched a documentary about it where they're trying to make a pair of garden shears, and they're like, we tried to design something that a very like well-built like meathead who can't even scratch his own head because his muscles are so big. Like, we need to make something that he can use. And then also the 80 to 90-year-old who's very frail. Like, if you design for the two ends, you kind of take care of the middle. And it seems a bit like that's kind of what you're getting to. So I wanted to mention that as an example from a different industry. But can you just explain the difference between Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting? Just so people who aren't familiar with this world, they might be thinking, oh, weightlifting is just lifting weights, like doing bicep curls and stuff like that. But there's a difference, just so people have that language as we go through the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually, like, for me, going through the podcast, I'll always kind of refer to it as weight training and weightlifting for that distinction, so they kind of know. But weightlifting is the Olympic sport. So it's 2 lifts, it's snatch and clean and jerk. And we get 3 lifts in each, and we try and hit the highest number we can in a snatch, highest number we can in a clean and jerk. We add those 2 numbers together, and that's our total. And so we compete for the highest total. Powerlifting is very similar, but it's 3 lifts. So you get squat, bench, and deadlift. And each of those, you get 3 attempts as well. And you combine those 3 lifts to get your total as well. So slightly different, very, very similar format in the way that the winner is decided, but just different lifts in general.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Just so people listening, if you say weight training, that's just kind of lifting weights in a very general sense, getting stronger using resistance training. Weightlifting is going to refer to Olympic weightlifting. I'd be curious how because I've actually had the pleasure of being to your gym a few times now, because I kept finding myself in Orlando over the past few years. You're always very gracious in inviting me in, but you have a great community there. How have you been able to build that community amongst sort of these very different populations?
I really think that two things there. I think building a community, number one, relies on thinking about the culture that you want to bring to people. And for me, the community was always driven out of me finding a home in a gym. I've always been in gyms my whole life. I've loved training. I've loved lifting. Even as a rugby player, I found that the strength and conditioning side, being in a gym and pushing myself in the gym where I actually didn't need a team around me to do it. It was just me and some barbells, some dumbbells, was always where I found most comfort in a lot of ways. And I was very lucky to be in certain gyms throughout my career where I found community myself. And I recognize that there's a lot of people that are looking for that. They don't know they're looking for that necessarily, but they're looking for that. And in psychology, you have something actually called your third place. And the psychological third place is based off of the idea that you have home, you have work, and these are both places where you find connection, social connection. But most people need a third place. And so it's somewhere where you don't have the pressures of work, or you don't have family, where you can find social connection with other people. And I always found that my third place was the gym. Other people find it in other clubs. It could be dance. It could be a place of worship. For me, it was a gym. So I always wanted to create a space that made other people feel as comfortable as I felt in a gym. Because at the end of the day, we all know that your regular Globo gyms, your LA Fitness, your Crunch Fitness, there's nothing against them, but they can be intimidating environments. And just getting healthy shouldn't be intimidating. It's already intimidating. It's already hard enough as it is. And so why not find somewhere where everybody's supportive? And that was the goal in Rise Athletics. I mean, it's the goal. It's kind of the meaning behind the name. Our hashtag a lot of the time is Rise Together. We always talk about accountability in gyms, and we talk about accountability in training, and nothing is better than going to the gym and your coach knows you by your name. So you walk through the door and they say hi to you personally rather than a receptionist just saying hi. They make you feel welcome. And a lot of that intimidation that goes with the discomfort of training and pushing yourself is eased just by having people around you that they genuinely want to see you succeed, versus it just being you by yourself every time, because that self-motivation, we all know, can be difficult.
Yeah, right. Like the work itself is already hard enough, and then all the discomfort around a new environment, new people, new setting. So I think even like the chain gyms that you mentioned, all of them are going to kind of advertise an idea of like building community, but that obviously gets lost at scale. And these organizations are always like it's a top down thing, right? So you and Jamie co-own the gym. So what are the things that you actually do, from interacting with members to training additional staff? Like, how do you actually facilitate that? Because everyone says like, oh, we want to build a great community, and some succeed and some don't. So it obviously starts with you and Jamie. So like, what have you focused on as owners to actually do that?
I think personally, a little bit of my history. So, and then I'll go on to us as owners is that we talked about Gen Pop earlier, and I found when I was younger, I was overweight. I was always active, which is the interesting part of it. I was always active, but I was overweight. Yeah, so I loved playing rugby. I played all different sports, but I was very lucky to have a family that always had family dinners, and like portion control was my problem. I had a sweet tooth and portion control, and so it was always funny because for me, I learned about health myself very early on. I was 16. I broke my arm playing rugby, both bones, radius and ulnar, and I was stuck in a cast for 8 weeks, sat on the couch, got even bigger, and I just wanted to make a change. So I started making changes in my health very early on. And so that goes to that Gen Pop side of things too. And I know we're going to talk about that later, about having that foundation. And so it starts not only just as owners, but as I think as individuals. I place a huge emphasis on health in our gym way before I place an emphasis on fitness. Health underpins fitness, which is lost in a lot of weightlifting gyms, or just a lot of high level sport, I believe. And so me and Jamie, both of us, Jamie comes from a high level gymnastics background, and we both love living a healthy lifestyle. So before anything as owners, it's more as as people. We are both trying to live a very healthy lifestyle, and we say it a lot. I think it's lost the importance of it, but you have to lead from the front. You have to lead from example. And Jamie and I both believe that health is crucial to just honestly living a happier life. I don't think people realize the positive benefit. I actually posted something else. It was another study talking about how training impacts mental health. I think that some of these lifestyle factors that we'll talk about later genuinely allow me to live a happier life than a lot of people. Not many people like me when I say that I'm happier because of these health factors, but I truly believe that it is true. And so me and Jamie really try and emulate that and lead from the front to begin with. And then everything that we do in the gym kind of builds on that, because I think it can almost come across as fake if we are trying to promote all of these things in the gym, community and health and all of this, but yet we're not living that lifestyle ourselves. And I know a lot of gyms that they'll train and then at the end of the day, they'll throw a monthly party and they'll go and get drunk and they'll be drinking and all sorts. And for us, it's kind of, we always said we do things like that. We have community events, we have potlucks, but they're always more about coming together as a community and being healthy, and rather than a party, so to speak, or like, oh, let's come to our Christmas, New Year's party and everyone's drinking. That's not really our vibe. Like we try and do like community bike rides. We try and get out in the sun. We'll hire a yoga instructor to come in and do more things like so those community events are kind of built on top of that lifestyle that we're trying to promote. I think that's one of the big things that we do as owners is trying to get people to realize that the gym is a very small sector of the overall lifestyle of being healthy.
Yep.
We have all sorts of things that I'm sure we'll talk about later on about lifestyle. But I always tell people, I'm like, you're here for an hour a day. There's 23 other hours of the day where you have to be trying to promote your own health. And so when you come into the gym and your coaches want to see you do your best, absolutely 100%. But you've also got 23 other hours where you have a responsibility to yourself to still be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot can get lost in just the idea that, fitness by itself is going to solve it. And like most people aren't even in there every day of the week, right? So you say there's 23 hours in a day. Usually it's like 2 to 3 hours a week, 2 to 4 hours a week. You're going to get somebody, which is still a lot of time. Like if you do it well, like I used to have this thing where I would occasionally, as a trainer, get in disagreements with somebody's like medical doctor about like what would need to be done, because they would give what I would think were not great suggestions from the fitness side, and I would want them to push a little bit harder. But the doctor would see them once every 3 months, once every 6 months. I'm like, you've got 20 minutes with them every few months. I'm like, I'm getting them 3 days a week. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm like, I'm going to win that argument. Like I'm going to win them over. I'm like, I just have more time with them.
And it's not, and obviously time plays a big role in that, but time, and I think this may have been that coaching collective that you came to, or it was one afterwards where I spoke about trust and building trust. I don't know if it was that one. It was that one. And I mean, that's one of the biggest things is you have medical professionals, like you say, that you go to and they see you for 30 minutes. Some of my athletes I see for 12 to 15 hours a week, some of my elite weightlifters. And so if a medical professional, I'm sorry to say, thinks that they can build better trust and a deeper relationship with somebody in 20 minutes than I can in 15 hours a week, they're sadly mistaken. Trust doesn't work like that. And if you look at the psychology of behavior change, change comes from trusted individuals. It's a ripple effect. It's one of the reasons why social media is so bad these days is you're trying to change the opinions of people that are miles away. And they don't trust you. And so all you do is put up walls, get defensive, whereas actually to create proper change, you have to have trust. And that's something that is, I think, unique to coaches. And it also speaks to the importance of what we do as coaches, which I think is really, really undervalued these days in the industry. for the positive changes we can make because of the unique position we're in. But yet we are undervalued and in some of these health areas that I think we could be utilized better with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, there's a lot of conversation around like what jobs are going to get replaced with AI. Even when I was still training, just the idea of the significant shift to online training models and like Tonal and Peloton and things like that. I think for people like you, there's never really going to be a concern. I think like if the coach is good enough and has those strong relationships, it's never going to be a concern. I think it's for the people who aren't necessarily taking advantage and kind of honoring the relationship between the client, that those people are going to be vulnerable. So more message to kind of the coaches. You were saying how much time you do get with your clients each week. It's like, it's such an honor. And like, you have knowledge that they don't. Like, if you're not really taking advantage of that relationship and that time to positively help them, I think there's a responsibility that you owe to them, especially like we charge a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So
or you can charge a lot of money. I think that's one of the big things. You can charge a lot of money if you provide that value. And it's a big if, because I could jump on social media and spend an extra 3 or 4 hours, gain more followers, and then sell programs. But the programs aren't what make the changes in the person. And that's such a misconception these days that we've created in the industry, is that, oh, it's just the program. And when people come to our gym, we talk a lot like, this isn't a transactional relationship. You cannot pay me X amount of money per month and you get health in return. But you can pay to have access to my knowledge, my support, my motivation, and all of these things that if you want to buy in and invest in yourself, you can pull out things that are priceless. But I'm the co-pilot. You're the pilot. And I'll sit on the tarmac all day long in this plane and it won't take off unless you get on board. And that's some of that. It goes to just how you interact with your client, like you say, how you build trust, and then getting them to understand that they have to relinquish quite a bit of control and invest in this process to be able to get the most from it. I remember telling somebody, I said, well, are you going to move online after COVID? Like, our gym closed down, and I remember saying, if we're going to go online, I'm going to change industries. I don't do this to be online. Online, like social media, like this is amazing because of the impact and the reach we can have. But when it comes to somebody going to a physical place and being surrounded by people that support them and want to see them grow and want to see them succeed, I honestly didn't want to be part of a fitness industry that wasn't going to have that in-person contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can totally see that for you. And where you're like, if I wanted to be online, I would be.
Yeah. I could have stayed online. I could have transitioned, but that's not why I do this.
Yep. So we've mentioned the Coaches Collective a few times already. Can you just explain what that is?
So the Coaches Collective is basically a network of coaches in the Orlando area that throughout the years of coaching. So I've coached in Orlando for about 10 years. And it's just a network of people that I've met, coaches, clinicians. Doesn't matter what kind of coach you are, personal trainer, you could be powerlifter, CrossFit, weightlifting, kettlebell, yoga, but just a network of people where we can reach out to each other, ask questions. We plan meetups, and currently I'm trying to put together like a study group so we can try see who's interested in passing a certain certification, and we'll study for it together. Just a place where we can spread information rather than kind of keep it to ourselves, which is one of those things in our industry, again, is the idea that somebody has all these secrets and it's why they're successful, and they don't want to spread it around when there's no real secrets in fitness. I mean, you don't need to be doing the most advanced training with velocity-based training or this new French contrast training, or so many people think it's about that high level stuff, and it's really not. So it's about just the same community that I've built in the gym for people trying to get healthy, the same thing for coaches to try and create a bigger impact with their own clients and find the support from other coaches that have been there, done it, and want to spread that information on.
Yeah, and it's largely in person. I don't know if there's any online aspect to it. I think there's probably a Facebook group. But that was one of those things that I was so impressed that you were organizing and spearheading, because so much now it's like, oh, join my online community. It's a great community of professionals, but it's like you never meet each other. It's surface level engagement. But I was really impressed with, I think I've been to 2 of them amongst other times that I've been there, but the depth in which you're willing to go, especially because the first one I went to was all about like trust and vulnerability as a coach. I think that was like the large topic. And you were incredibly trusting, inviting me to sort of present without knowing really anything about me. And then you also being very vulnerable to, feedback and opening yourself up, being like, I don't know everything. It's largely a self-serving group as well, right? Where you can bring these professionals together and you're like, I'm going to get free education from them. But a lot of people don't have the humility to put themselves in that situation. So anyone listening to this in the Orlando area, if you're a coach, get in touch with Mark. Is it strange, or are there any struggles kind of running a business with your now wife, Jamie?
I thought that question might come up. It's been difficult for sure. It's never been rainbows and fairy tales. Jamie and I started dating where just before I actually started my weightlifting club. So I was coaching at multiple gyms, had my personal training, and through just a couple of different events, I ended up taking the plunge and opening my weightlifting club out of one of the gyms that I was working at. Fast forward a couple of years, it was just after the pandemic, and that gym was moving, and a gym came up for sale, and it was like, well, I told this story today, actually. I was 29. I was kind of going through like existential crisis of like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to be subleasing a space my whole life? What's the big picture here? We want to have a family, so on and so forth. And within 2 weeks, everything changed. Purchased a gym, moved in. Jamie graduated that summer and quit her job and just came full-time in a gym. Neither of us had business experience. I had been coaching my whole life. Jamie had just graduated with a degree in physical education, and it was basically hit the ground running and figure it out. And so there has been a lot of figuring it out. There's been a lot of stress. There's been a lot of sacrifice. But I think one of the things we've learned is to really work as a team, communicate well. We've struggled to find balance, I think, as all young business owners and couples who are business owners have found. But at the same time, there's no one I'd rather do it with. We literally, we're in there all the time. We come home and we talk about it all the time. It's 100% all of our lives. But at the same time, we get to sit back and we get to say, we created this. It's not I created this or she created it. It's we created this. And there's a lot of pride and sense of accomplishment so far. And to like we got married recently, so it was awesome to see the people that we had at our wedding that had supported us through this journey, and to have so many good people around us that have supported us and not forced us to grow, but wouldn't let us fail either, kind of thing. And so it's one of those things where I'm sure it's the same answer from a lot of couples that are business owners together, but it's one of the most stressful, difficult things you can do in life, but also one of the most, if not the most rewarding thing I've ever done with. So,
but like net, you think it's probably been beneficial for your relationship? It's probably forced a lot of things, forced you to confront things that probably could have gone unaddressed much longer without having this business structure sort of forcing you to look at it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's no putting things off. It's weird. And I'm sure other people understand this, but where life kind of keeps throwing the same lesson at you until you learn it. And for us, we have to learn it because our business and our livelihoods depend on it. So we recognize those things so quick now, and we're able to overcome them together. And we're able to recognize when she's struggling, so I can put in like some extra effort to support her. She sees when I'm struggling, and she puts in extra effort to support me. We're both still competitive weightlifters. Both of us ex-athletes with a lot of injuries too.
Mm-hmm.
So and as any high-level athlete or long-term athlete knows, that a lot of the time our ability to train and work out is very much linked with our mental health as well. And
Sure.
so we both have those highs and those lows through training, and being able to adapt to each other and how we're feeling in different times. Like Jamie's in a bit of a phase of rehab at the moment. I've just come out of one, and it's my last year as a senior lifter to be able to compete at the state championships in Florida. So she's extremely supportive, even though she can't train the way she wants to right now. She puts how she feels aside so that she can support me in my goals. So it's really cool just to see how much of a team we can be and how much we can overcome and adapt to together.
Yeah, I love that. Do you still do your own programming, or do you outsource some of that because you're still competing at a high level? And it's one of those things that people who don't work in the industry probably would be like, why would you ever outsource your training? But it does happen quite a bit. I was just curious, do you do your own programming for workouts, nutrition, and recovery, or do you kind of hand that off to somebody else?
So I do my own programming pretty much. Like I say, I unfortunately from rugby is not a very forgiving sport. So I have quite a few injuries coming from that. So I manage all my programming, all my nutrition and things like that. And I always kind of tell people that the hardest athlete you'll ever coach is yourself. Unless you coach your wife, maybe, I don't know. But
Right.
and so kind of to figure it out myself with my own body, because I have all of those biases on what I want to do. I think has actually been a huge player in my success and my growth and my learning. But I do also have a coach, so I can always bounce ideas off him. When I compete at meets, he's there, and so he coaches me when I compete at competitions. But the rest of it is me kind of training myself and figuring out myself. But kind of like we were saying with the coaching collective earlier, I might do this by myself in the day to day, but I have a support network. I have a physical therapist who has identified a few things, a few of my old injuries that I didn't realize maybe had the severity that they do have. And so I've been able to bounce ideas off of her to manipulate my training, which has really helped me come back in the last 3 months, because had some lower back pain that was really debilitating, and had to take out certain exercises, and without other people being able to still be there to support me, I wouldn't be able to train myself and program for myself in the way I can to find success.
So as a gym owner, you probably get a lot of requests from people that may or may not fall outside of your scope. Like, how do you handle that? Because, to a certain level, like you can handle nutrition requests, but then it's like, oh, what if they have a specific disease state? Be like, so there's a lot of nuance to handling those requests. Have you just built like a really good network that you refer out to, or basically how do you handle all those requests that maybe fall outside of what you're comfortable and you feel is kind of safe and ethical for you to handle?
Definitely a network, 100%. There's definitely a network of people that I refer out to: chiropractors, soft tissue therapists, physical therapists, RDs, and we always kind of have those people in our back pocket ready at any point. But I think the biggest thing is honesty. We kind of, since you've been to the gym, we've put up our values literally on big flags in the gym to kind of really hone in on that community, that culture. And so when it comes to things that we can't handle, it's my expectation from my coaches is always that they speak with honesty and they set expectations first and foremost. So it might be like pretty common, but this is a good example, is somebody who wants nutritional help, and we find out like they had their gallbladder removed, so they can't digest fats in the same way. It's one of those things where we always say like, look, we have nutritional knowledge. We can help you with the basics, and we can give you education around nutrition. But the specifics of what you might need are going to be different compared to the specifics of what somebody else might need. And so if they kind of want to start that process with us, we kind of start with those caveats of at the end of the day, you might have a gallbladder, you might not have a gallbladder, but energy in, energy out still plays a role. And so we can work on high level things and just some of the good pillars of health with people that might have a few areas that require specialist help as well. And so I always tell people we can work to a certain point. However, this is not my area of expertise, and we may need to. And if at any point you feel uncomfortable or you feel like you want to go to somebody who has more knowledge than me, I'm never going to be offended. And that's something that a lot of coaches are. It's a quantity over a quality thing. And that's where we talk about the value in what we charge and things like that is sometimes people will actually value you more if you say, no, I can't do this, and give them honesty and say, I'm willing to work with you for as long as I feel comfortable and you feel comfortable. But if any point that you feel uncomfortable, it's your job to tell me. And if any point I feel uncomfortable, I promise I'm going to tell you so we can creatively solve this problem together. Just because I might not have that specialist knowledge doesn't mean that we can't still create a coach-athlete relationship and get you to a better position than you're in right now.
Right. And generally speaking, you're going to be more knowledgeable than the patient or the client about whatever that subspecialty might be. So you can always help as a quarterback in that situation, because it's very daunting to be like, now I need to manage all of these other relationships. Whereas a coach, you can help with that coordination. You can reach out, you can see what those recommendations are. So you can kind of work together for like a synergistic solution where it's not just like much of what happens in the traditional medical communities where everything is just siloed. It's like you can have very conflicting interventions just because the providers aren't speaking with each other.
Yeah, 100%. And that, at the end of the day, that really integrates health in a much more holistic way. And holistic health is we know is way more is way more successful than when you do just go, okay, well, I need to go get this one pill for this one thing, which then has a knock-on effect, like you say, the next silo over there. So you're going to go to somebody else where it's like, well, hang on a second. Why don't we just baseline better and then touch on a few things over here and integrate? Well, if you're feeling down, you're feeling some mental health issues, but you're not going and getting some sunlight every day. Like, how about we start working on getting some daily sunlight? How about we start working on some daily exercise before we just jump ship and then maybe start looking at medication or something like that? There's lots of different ways we can approach this and then escalate when we need to.
Mm-hmm. And again, like the coordination between a coach and a therapist can be so valuable. So both of you can make better decisions than relying on the person who's already struggling with a particular situation. Be like, you translate what I'm teaching you to them. And it's like, it's different languages generally, neither of which the person or the patient generally speaks. Yeah. So you like being a coach, you can really help kind of bridge those conversations. You mentioned kind of pillars of health, and I did want to end up talking about like sort of a hierarchy, because a lot of people, especially with how easily information is disseminated now, there's just like little nuggets of information about health, and it can just be like very, very amorphous and be like, how do I structure this into my life? I have 40,000 protocols I can do, right? You mentioned morning sunlight. Be like, where does that fit in? So can you kind of break down like how you describe pillars of health, or maybe a hierarchy of how you teach people so they don't get overwhelmed with all the information that is out there?
Yeah, that's something in our gym that we're very, very specific on too. Whenever somebody comes into the gym, they do get 2 sessions, one-on-ones with coaches, where we first of all take them kind of through we call it a movement education session versus a movement assessment, because it's not pass or fail. It's more about finding out where they are with their movement and understanding of movement, so we can better coach them going forwards, versus saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you failed this, you failed, which just makes them feel like a loser, and they walk out the gym feeling like they didn't accomplish anything. So that's
It's a
kind of
lousy sales tactic.
yeah, oh yeah, you need me kind of thing,
Yeah,
which
super lazy sales tactic.
exactly. But the second one is really the one that I think is the most important. But unfortunately, even as a gym owner and knowing everybody that comes through the gym and all our members is probably not the thing that people realize is the most important. And it's our lifestyle session. And we categorize it. And I don't know whether these are not all inclusive by any means, but we talk about sleep, nutrition, mindfulness, and daily movement. And so we go over those four things. And obviously, we know what sleep is, we know what nutrition is, and we basically go over some foundational principles of nutrition, some foundational principles of sleep. Daily movement is one where people go, oh, so going to the gym. You know, we're like, well, that's one part of it. The other part might be making sure you get your step count in per day, making sure that you do some stretching and some self-myofascial release, some foam rolling, some things like that. And then mindfulness one is more where it's based around stress reduction. We talk about the fact that stress is not just physical, stress is mental, emotional, and the body, for simplistic terms, processes it all the same. So when you are, prime example, we have some weightlifters that are accountants. It's tax season, and so we drop their volume of their training down, and we manipulate their training more during tax season because they're more stressed at work. So their ability to recover from training goes down just because their work stress has gone up. And so we talk about things that we can do to reduce stress, non-sleep deep rest, meditation kind of thing. We talk about daily sunlight, getting outside in nature. We could even go as far as grounding, some of these other things, journaling, ways in which they can introspect, kind of stop consuming social media and other things and start actually looking inward to figuring out their own thoughts, their own emotions, and kind of reduce stress from that standpoint as well. So those are the four things that we baseline as the important things that we want people to be focusing on inside and outside the gym. And then everything kind of gets layered on top of that.
So you alluded to something really smart there. I want you to kind of break it down a little bit more. Injuries, they can be acute, right? Sometimes things just happen. You step off of a curb and you roll your ankle, acute injury. A lot of times injuries occur, but even then you might be vulnerable because of what I'm going to discuss. So injuries are generally like a load management issue where the person is just inadequately recovered, or the amount of volume or the amount of training stress was too great. And that's going to put them in a vulnerable position where they're not adequately recovered. However you want to describe that. But you mentioned that you're Olympic weightlifters. Some of them are accountants, so they're taking on more stress at work. It's hard to quantify all these things, but when you look at like an exercise-based injury or an exercise-based workload, you can't just be accounting for the exercise-based workload. You need to see what's happening, like what else is happening in their life. The accounting one is a great example because people can understand that accountants get busy during tax season. But there's all these other factors that even if you're managing your sort of exercise training workload appropriately, maybe using like an acute to chronic workload calculator or something like that. If you're not looking at these other factors outside of that, you're probably going to be vulnerable. So if you could just kind of speak to anything about how you try to do that, even though you can't necessarily quantify it, just kind of like the skill of a coach though, right?
Yeah. And that goes back to me saying, I don't want to work online, right? is that these people that come to our gym, I kind of, one thing I always kind of say is I have my coach's checklist, and it's kind of like, how's your day been? How was your nutrition? How was your sleep? How are you feeling? Like, what's kind of like, hey, what's going on in your life right now? How are you feeling? And people think that's a very surface level question, but in reality, as a coach, it's actually a very deep question. It's I want to know, like, what was your, where was your mental point coming into this training session? Like, what was it? Yeah, I feel fantastic, everything feels great, I want a PR today? Or is it actually, no, I just broke up my relationship's down the sink, or I just found out that a loved one was diagnosed with some kind of disease, or and so it's really it's me figuring out kind of like how HRV works, but from a more psychological perspective. Like for those of you who don't know what HRV is it's a measurement of recovery that we can use in conditioning workouts, cardiovascular health, things like that. So, but this is me figuring out, well, are we in a session where we can push the percentages today, or are we in a position where we actually have to pull back on them today? And like you said, there isn't really a way to quantify that. I think that's where the value of a coach really comes out and comes into fruition, because it's about reading people. It's about how well do you know the people that you're coaching? How well do you understand whether they are hiding something, whether they say they're great, but it's a surface smile, and actually deep down they're actually going through something. That really dictates whether, I mean, from years of doing this, right? But you can see it in the way they move, you can see it in their body language, and I don't think there's necessarily a way to quantify it unless you got somebody to do a questionnaire every day and then went through it. And I used to be a very objective, very analytical coach in that way, and try and figure out ways to really get the numbers and dive into the numbers. And what I realized over time was I was just missing the personal connection that is really what you want in coaches. I have great mentors. I have a phenomenal coach, and it's not because he got me to do a questionnaire before I trained. It's because he knew what my goals were. He knew what drove me. He knew what motivated me, and he could see when I was having a good day and when I was having a bad day. And so it's kind of a bad answer for other coaches to kind of say there's no real way to do this other than experience and invest in your athletes. My coach actually told me this a long time ago, and he said the biggest mistake coaches can make is thinking that it's about them. My career won't be successful if I focus on me and me being a successful coach. Coaching is one of those things where if my athletes are successful, I become successful. I won't be a successful coach without having successful athletes. And I say athletes, but that's just success stories all around. The mom who had her first baby that can't lose that baby weight, that didn't think she would ever be back down to her pre-baby weight or be as strong as she used to be. And you see her come in and she's disheartened because she hasn't seen progress. And instead of pushing her to crush her in a workout, you take her to the side and have a conversation about maybe we can change a few things outside the gym, or maybe we're not looking in the right places and we can motivate her in a different way. Those are really the things that I think differentiate good coaches from great coaches. And it's I feel like I need to give an objective measure, but there really isn't an objective measure in there. You can create systems around that, but the more systems you create, the less you have that personal relationship again. And to me, it comes back down to being able to have a personal relationship with everybody that you coach.
Data is great, but too much data or poorly structured systems can kind of create a barrier between you and the person. Where it's like, yeah, great, you're doing velocity-based assessment to start the session to see what their nervous system's telling you, and you have HRV scores and stuff like that. But, you might just be missing like the look on their face where like they don't have it today.
Absolutely. And it goes both ways, right? Some days people are so focused on the program and sticking to the program, and you miss an opportunity to actually hit a PR. And you don't get those opportunities very often, the more elite of an athlete you are. So right. It goes both ways to see if somebody's moving well and they're in a good mood, take advantage of it, big them up, pump them up. Let's go for something big, because you might not get that opportunity again for a while. And so it definitely goes both ways in the way you can kind of look at those athletes and see how they're feeling and pull the best out of them at all times. And I talk a lot about creating success in training sessions, not just like following the program, or the program will do the work. It's up to the coach and the athlete to create successful training sessions every day.
Yeah, you got to cook while the skillet's hot. That's one of those things that I've noticed getting older. Those days are less and less frequent, Like I used to have a lot of those days where I'm like, we're always cooking. And now I'm like, you really got to feel for it and be like, okay, these are the days where I really do have to be aggressive and take advantage of it and just trust that like I'm well-rounded enough to really keep pushing at this time. Hey everyone, that's all for today's show. I want to thank you so much for stopping by and watching, especially if you've made it all the way to this point. If you'd like to be notified when new episodes are going to be released, feel free to subscribe and make sure you hit the bell button as well. To learn more about today's guest, feel free to look in the description. You can also visit the podcast website, which is exploringhealthpodcast.com. That website will also be linked in the description. As always, likes, shares, comments are a huge help to me and to this channel and to the show. So any of that you can do, I would really appreciate. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.